Welcome to the God Culture, where we urge you to challenge tradition as 1 Thessalonians 5:21 tells us, "Prove all things, hold fast that which is good." We do not intend to be confrontational, but to compare what the Bible really says versus the traditions of men which Jesus himself rebuked. Jesus said to the Pharisees, "Full well ye reject the commandment of God, that ye may keep your own tradition." Mark 7:9. We are continuing our Solomon's Gold series today with Where is the River from Eden? Warning, the simple observable truth of this session will blow your mind. Christian scholars will mostly say we cannot know where Eden River is because the landscape of the earth changed so drastically from the flood, or worse, the rivers of earth have been carved out over millions of years. Funny, we have witnessed new rivers and large canyons being carved out in just a few days. During the eruption of Mount St. Helens, for instance, in Washington State in the 1980s. Go look at the films. Areas look much like the Grand Canyon, but the little Colorado River has slowly eroded away the amazing Grand Canyon over millions of years. Problem is, the little Grand Canyon was carved in just days by the volcanic eruption, which proves it does not take millions of years. You say, don't scholars ask the obvious questions? If the narrow Colorado River did so much damage to the canyons, why don't most rivers repeat that same pattern? Because it doesn't happen. That's why. In 2 Peter 3:3-7, Peter tells us the last generations will deny creation and the flood. Knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lusts. Why deny creation and the flood? Their own lusts. Remember that. And saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, died, all things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation. For this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of God the heavens were of old, God created them, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, willingly ignorant, fake space program, mind you, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, willingly ignorant of Noah's flood, perished. But the heavens and the earth, which are now, by the same word are kept in store. They did not change even after the flood. Remember that. Reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. Do we have a science today that does this? Yes, both creation and the flood are denied through occult science, not provable, observable science, mind you. From what we can observe, the Bible is still and always will be true. We are buying into an ancient science of the occult. It is not new, and we will produce a series exposing this in great detail. When science or history meet the Bible and they disagree, the Bible is always correct. There are some instances that translations have been toyed with, especially the modern versions written by Jesuits, who in their own words wish to manipulate you into accepting evolution and wish to lead you to question creation and the flood. We will reveal this in detail in a series we are working on as well. By the way, if someone tells you the firmament was an ice canopy prior to the flood, which came crashing down to the earth, show them Peter's words here, saying the heavens and earth are still in their place, and waters above and below the firmament remain so. The windows were shut, but are still there. Also, remind them that Genesis 7:11, in the flood encounter, the windows of heaven were opened. And then in Genesis 8:2, it further says the windows of heaven were shut. They're still there. And they did not come crashing down to the earth. This is another theory that has no biblical foundation whatsoever, but opens the door to junk science, occult science, and we don't even realize it. It suggests the firmament is no longer there, leaving a window open for science to instill occult principles of space originating from ancient times, Babylonian times, the days of Nimrod's Kabbalah, which is carried through the ages and still thrives today, instilled in several what we call religions. Look at the 9 planets. They have names of God's enemies, fake gods. The space missions with all occult god names, including the ocean missions like Hades, god of the underworld. Very nice. Do not fall for this occult science. It is not only false, but it intends to cause us to question our faith. When the Bible and science do not agree, know this: science is always wrong. 100% of the time. In this segment, we will propose a very strong theory that we can know where the river from Eden is located, as well as the 4 heads that flow from it. We have proved that Philippines is Ophir, Sheba, Tarshish, and ancient Havilah was its name before the flood. Now we will explore the ocean floor, actual maps, which perfectly match Scripture. This is certainly a new way of thinking, but the evidence is so overwhelming, we believe you will finish watching this video and realize you now know where these rivers are as well. People have already been contacting us with frustrations as to why their pastors or theologians are not covering these kinds of topics. We do not know your pastor, and likely he is a man with a good heart, wanting to do the right thing and full of love. But remember, the real challenge here is not with local pastors. This is with a tradition that comes down from seminaries in which pastors attend. We hope your pastor will see this video and others that we produce and absorb its content and recognize the truth, as they likely will, and prove all things for themselves, just as you will. Seminaries were hijacked many years ago by Jesuit philosophy, and we will expose this along the way, as there is an occult agenda behind the Jesuit thought process, which has its true root in Kabbalah, which is the truest form of Satanism, in which Lucifer is the light of what they call truth. And the God, our God, YHWH, Yahweh, Yahuwah, is considered to be the bad guy. Whose perspective do you think that comes from? Certainly not God's. Certainly not the prophets and not Jesus. Not the Bible. Again, the Bible is far clearer than we give credit, and we can and will understand the Bible for ourselves when we press in and really read it. Oh yeah, that includes the first 2/3 we call the Old Testament. We have found enough clues in the Old Testament to create this entire video series on this one subject alone. If you're not reading it, you're missing the whole message Jesus preached from the Old Testament. He didn't have the New Testament. Paul preached from the Old Testament. He didn't have the New Testament. And you are really selling yourself short if you are relying on your pastor to spend this study time with God for you and impart it into your life in a 20 to 30 minute sermon once a week. This is the reason we are so easily deceived. Not because your pastor intends to do so, or that he even is, because no pastor can possibly be quite that good. There is no replacement for your knowing the word for yourself. Many of us are expecting our pastors to replace the high priestly role in our lives. But there is only one high priest, Jesus, and he replaced Moses. He and only he fulfills the order of Melchizedek, and no one else can perform his role. If you are not spending the time with him and learning for yourself, you are certainly neglecting your role as a priest in your home. You cannot blame your pastor or any theologian for this, and we will not do so either. Again, as we have said before, prove all things, including this video message. Let's quickly review what we have learned in this series thus far. Ophir is a larger area of which Sheba and Havilah and Tarshish had kingdoms within. The queen of Sheba heard of Solomon's wisdom in her own land, Ophir, from the navy of Hiram, king of Tyre, and came to learn about Solomon's God, who may not have been as foreign to her as we have been taught, by the way. This story appears in the middle of the story of Solomon's navy leaving for Ophir and returning from Ophir, which tells us the queen's land in which she heard of Solomon is in Ophir. Sheba is in Ophir. There is a possible Hebrew correlation, in fact, between Cebu, originally spelled with an S, Cebu, the largest commerce island of the Philippines, and Shebu is the same word as Sheba in the Hebrew language, meaning oath. There are many other Hebrew ties in the Philippines as well, such as Mount Apo. Apo is a Hebrew word, which matches the mountain of the Orient in the story of Joktan's son's journey, Ophir, Sheba, and Havilah, which history tells us settled in the same area with each other. The gold, the almug trees, and other resources of Ophir are the same as the Philippines, and the history of that country is filled with explorers who referred to that area as Ophir and Tarshish, even contractually, even though some historians ignorantly place Tarshish in Spain, and Ophir in Saudi Arabia, and Sheba in Ethiopia. Oh, let's just take a dart and throw it at a board, because there's nothing credible that matches any of that. Tarshish, Kittim, Elisha, and Dedan were the maritime sons according to the Table of Nations in Genesis 10, and they founded other islands within the archipelago of the Philippines. We know there is plenty of room there for all of these names, as there are over 7,000 islands in the Philippines. We have studied over 100 scriptures that seem to direct us to the Orient for the 3-year journey of Solomon's navy. 3 years, not 3 weeks. Even more ancient history from China, Indonesia, India, Greece, the Muslim empires, etc., all refer to the Philippines as the Isles or the Islands of Gold. This is no coincidence, as the gold found in the Philippines was so plentiful even in the 1600s that Magellan's historian Barbosa describes the king of Butuan sifting sand from the surface of the ground to reveal gold nuggets as large as a chicken's egg. This is significant. Imagine how that worked over 2,000 years prior to that. Now we are going to expound on the fact that the land of Ophir was, in fact, the ancient land of gold, Havilah. And we believe this will lead us to the actual location. First, remember that Upaz is the gold of Pisan. This is a clue that ties the Pisan River, which surrounds the land of Havilah, with the land of Ophir. We are confident that the patriarchs after the flood went in search of this ancient land of resources because it is the only river described by its gold being good gold, as well as pearl and onyx. When the Bible goes out of its way to describe something in such detail while not giving the same detail to the other three rivers, this is meaningful. So let's dig in to the ancient rivers from Eden. Let us begin with a brief synopsis of Noah's flood, as this is critical in locating the ancient rivers as they were covered over by the flood. Genesis 7, 11, and 12. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. I remember sitting in Sunday school learning about how the earth was flooded from 40 days and nights of rain, which was and is ludicrous. The Bible doesn't say that. It says there were water volcanoes that burst forth from inside of the earth, and the windows of heaven were opened. Then it rained. The earth was already flooding before a drop of rain touched the ground. I once listened to a scientist try to explain how he ran the math on the earth flooding from 40 days and 40 nights of rain, and it would have had to rain so torrentially that the condensation would have created so much friction that the water, in fact, would have been at a boiling point temperature, so much so that the ark would have melted. Now this, of course, is ridiculous. His math may have been right, but he wasted all of that time because he didn't bother to read the Bible and understand what it actually says, because instead he probably got it from an ignorant children's book. I guess we feel that our young ones cannot handle water volcanoes. Are you kidding? So we have to dumb down the flood to just rain over 40 days and 40 nights? We can't read the passage? Come on. The scientists are waiting to pounce on our youth when they get into college, and 85% of them are converting from their Christianity in college. They're becoming atheists for the most part because we have failed to prepare them for the Pharisees. And this is our fault as parents. Stop it. The Bible says in Genesis 7:20, 15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. In order to cover up this lapse in logic, we then came up, Christianity, with the idea that maybe the mountains were shorter at that time prior to the flood and got larger because of the flood. Does the Bible say that? No. Actually, the opposite is true. The mountains were further above sea level at that time and dwarf in comparison today, as there is far more water on the earth. The great ocean was formed, and sea level has been higher ever since. By the way, no, we didn't make a mistake. There are not 7 oceans on earth. There is only one. It is all connected, so why do we let them tell us otherwise? For those wishing to claim that the mountains of the earth did not exist prior to the flood, well, we defer to the Bible. Deuteronomy 33:15 says, "And for the chief things of the ancient mountains," before the flood, of course, "and for the precious things of the lasting hills." Lasting? They survived the flood. According to Moses, approximately 1,000 years after the flood, the mountains and hills have existed since ancient times, before the flood, and they survived the flood. Of course, they were carved out in some areas and affected by erosion, but what we can observe, science, is that marine fossils from the ocean have been found atop every mountain range on Earth, including the very tallest mountain on Earth, the Himalayas. Science seems to need to tell us that these mountains came up out of the sea, but they have no such proof of this. It's merely a theory and not a good one. It does not match what we can observe. Science. And most especially, this theory opposes the Bible, and therefore we should throw it out on its ear. This is one of those subtle areas in which Christianity has allowed the occult philosophy in, and they did not see it coming. But these are the theories that will undermine the Bible and undermine our faith. They are misleading, and we need the truth. The New York Times reported, "Scientists have found fossils of whales and other marine animals in mountain sediments in the Andes." That's the Andes Mountains in South America. Marine fossils in most of the rock layers in the Grand Canyon, 7,000 to 8,000 feet above sea level. That's in North America. Marine fossils are also found high in the Himalayas, the world's tallest mountain range, reaching up to 29,000 feet above sea level. The tallest mountains on Earth, the Himalayas. Mount Everest also has marine fossils. Why? Because the Earth was flooded above the mountains 15 cubits. They didn't come up the mountains out of the sea. They were already there and they were covered over by the sea. So says the most well-documented book, history book, and science book. Don't let anybody tell you and dismiss it as those, because it is more accurate than either of any of today's standards. Christianity tries to placate these kinds of theories by accepting their premise, which pulls the carpet out from underneath them. It is obvious. Accept the theory that the mountains rose up out of the sea and undermine your faith. There is no other option. No. We need to stand on the Bible as true because it is. Science is wrong. Next, they will tell you God didn't create the heavens and the earth in 6 literal days because, they don't have the faith to believe what it says. Or better yet, what did Peter warn us about the denial of creation and the flood in the last days? He said they wish to pursue their own lusts. That's what's in the way, their own lusts. We are there. Side with the Bible, not fake occult science that clearly desires to explain away God because they wish to pursue their own lusts. They don't want to have a God. They want to be a God. Where did that message originate? Well, the Garden of Eden, of course, with Satan himself. There is truly nothing new under the sun, to quote King Solomon. This is an ancient science philosophy and a distortion of the 7 sacred sciences. When the earth was flooded, the new sea level covered over the ancient rivers. And we can still see them today by looking at the map of the ocean floor. The ocean floor was sea level in ancient times before the flood. Here is a map of the world ocean floor. Yes, one ocean, not seven. Notice anything that stands out here? For starters, there is what is known as the mid-ocean ridge, which starts 333 kilometers, odd occult number, by the way, which is 207 miles south of the North Pole, and it runs down between the continents in the Atlantic Ocean, under Africa, Asia, Australia, and through the Pacific all the way up to Mexico. Of course, in standard fashion, science breaks this ridge system into more than 7 names, just like the oceans, which are one ocean. But according to those very scientists, this is actually one continuous undersea mountain range, quotation marks, approximately 40,000 miles long. Wow! Nothing to see here. Move along. Oh, it's not just mountains, by the way. In the center of this 40,000-mile-long mountain range, quotations, is what science calls a rift, which has an average depth of 2.5 kilometers or 1.5 miles, and is as wide as 20 kilometers or 12 miles wide. 1.5 miles deep. Wouldn't that be classified in ancient times before the sea level rose to where it is today as, I don't know, maybe a river? Of course it would. But now, this is where the science blah, blah, blah comes in. And we're going to cover a lot of science, but don't be overwhelmed because you can understand this. The diagram in the upper right shows that this represents the boundary between plates, which we have zero proof of, by the way, and have never observed. Amazing. Never. Can't find a film of it anywhere. There are no videos of it functioning. And the Earth having a magma lava core, well, that's just a guess. Not even a hypothesis or a theory, it's a guess. We've never drilled that far. We don't know what's in the center of the Earth. We don't know. There is no evidence for magma as a core to the Earth whatsoever. It's junk science, and we will cover this. Not what you learned in science class, of course. Oh, we are just getting started. As seen in the upper right, they even tell us that the Earth moves like a conveyor belt at this point of the ocean floor at the mid-ocean ridge. This is a cute computer graphic, but have you ever seen a video of this occurring? Where is the movie? Here's a video of a supposed mission to the bottom of the deepest portion of Marianas Trench, the Challenger Deep, which is the deepest part of the ocean and is in the Pacific. How do we know this is the very bottom of the mid-ocean ridge? If they wanted to show us that, they would likely have filmed next to the wall of the ridge. And what is this robot doing? Why does the robot have to open the door himself? We couldn't install an automatic door? How much did we pay for this robot to collect dirt with a claw instead of giving him a shovel? Silly robot, didn't you know the ocean floor at the bottom of Marianas Trench moves like a conveyor belt? Look out! You'll get sucked into Hades. Oh, I forgot. This portion of the ocean floor is referred to by scientists as Hades, another false god. Perhaps it's not as bad as the Vatican Church naming the device in their telescope, the largest on Earth, on Mount Graham, Arizona, as Lucifer. And when caught, they changed the name so that it now forms an acronym. The acronym spells Lucifer. This is really bad, and likely This video is faked. For more fakery, go view the moon landings again. Explain how the American flag waves in the breeze on the moon, which is supposed to be a vacuum. Why the moon rover left no tracks, but there were footprints. How shadows appear in 3 different directions in the same frame. Yet there is only one sun and no artificial light was supposedly used according to astronauts. Why they seem to never be able to take a picture of the Earth, even with the Hubble telescope. And NASA, meaning to deceive in Hebrew, gives us CGI, computer-generated images, instead of photographs, which sometimes include things such as Disney's Pluto, the dog, superimposed into a CGI image of the planet Pluto, or whatever it is. The word sex is found photoshopped into cloud formations. How they pass through the Van Allen radiation belts in a tin can, when according to NASA's Orion project and even President Obama in recent days, we have yet to exit lower Earth orbit even today. We could go on and on and on. None of this ever happened. Now, the movie producer James Cameron is filming a submarine dive into Marianas Trench, but the trailer says it is for entertainment purposes only. In other words, it will not be accurate. It will not be science, but it's meant to entertain you. So, what is science? Science, the intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. Science equals observation and experiment, not conjecture and not religion. Any science requiring you to have faith in scientists that something occurred is a religion, not a science. Have we ever observed evolution of one single species? Ever? Never. Ever wonder how a male and female evolve in the same way at the same time in thousands and millions of species? Never happened. We have never observed either, whether alone, both at the same time. We've never found any proof, any evidence that one species ever evolved in all of history. And we should have found millions and billions of examples. And we can't find one. Run the numbers, and it would require trillions and trillions of species to funnel down to what we observe today, which is not evolving. Why did they stop? Why are none of the species still evolving? Did the monkeys in the Amazon discover plumbing and air conditioning? Of course not. Here is what we have observed in the deepest hole ever drilled.
This hard-to-find rusty cap in the ruins of a building in Russia's Kola Peninsula covers the deepest hole on Earth. The scientists drilled it off and on for 24 years from 1970 to 1994. They got down as far as 7.5 miles or about 12 kilometers deeper than the deepest ocean before blistering heat of 356 degrees Fahrenheit made them stop. At 4.3 miles down, the scientists found fossils of single-celled organisms called plankton.
The deepest hole ever drilled into the Earth's crust is 7.5 miles, 12 kilometers, and it was in Russia. And what did we find? We found water running through rock. No, there was not a sea of water as pictured in this video. And as for the single-celled plankton, where are those fossils? How would they know they are billions of years old? So we did not find magma or lava. Scientists will say we did not drill far enough, but this just proves the point, because this is the deepest hole ever drilled and no magma. Therefore, how can you espouse a theory that there's magma in the center core of the earth? It's ludicrous. There is no weight to it whatsoever. Don't worry, they'll come up with one or another theory, and possibly even a fossil manufactured in China, of course. This is still the deepest artificial point on Earth. They note the rock at that depth had been thoroughly fractured and was saturated with water, which was surprising. Surprising, you say? Well, because it doesn't fit their occult science agenda and position, which is that there should have been magma. And they're disappointed because they're wrong, because they have no evidence. Now, there's a claim here that the temperature was 356 degrees Fahrenheit. But that's suspect, along with the fossils, of course. They say water was present even at 12 kilometers or 7.5 miles, which is the bottom, but water begins evaporating at a boiling point of 212 degrees. Therefore, wouldn't this mean the presence of water proves the temperature was nowhere near that hot? Of course it would, even though they admit there was water, which is good, and no magma, which is good. They have to manipulate us by claiming they found fossils of billions of years old single-cell plankton. Where are these fossils? You won't find them. See them, touch them, feel them. Nope, won't happen. Because they do not exist yet, although they may well order some from China, as we said, which no one will be able to examine, of course. Kind of like the dinosaur bones, but we won't go there. We'll deal with that in another video. They also claim the water is not consistent with the ocean water, but how do we know that? They fail to point out as well the process in which ocean water goes through when entering the oceans through hydrothermal vents, which we will show you. But there was another hole drilled that showed more honesty in their report. Another example of a super deep hole drilled into the Earth's crust is the KTB borehole, Germany's super deep telescope into the Earth's crust. From 1990 to 1994, the KTB drilled into the Earth's crust 9,000 meters or 29,000 feet. We have acquired the actual report from the Oil Field Review from January 1995 regarding this project, and these are direct quotes from that report. Fluids. The scientists at KTB expected deep crystalline rock to be bone dry. But to their surprise, we've heard that before, water influx occurred at several depths. Why are they surprised again? There was water in the Russian super deep hole as well, and they already had foreknowledge of that. It was very common knowledge. Well, because it doesn't meet their occult agenda in which they have been indoctrinated. How is it that truth seems to surprise scientists so often? Tests showed the water had not leaked down recently from the surface. This disproves the theory that the water coming up through hydrothermal vents, which we will cover later, first supposedly leaks down into the rock through fissures, small cracks, but instead the water is already down there and comes up. We'll show these later. During a 2-month pumping test, 275 meters cubed or 730 bbl, don't worry about the technical, of salt water were produced from an open fracture system at the bottom of KTBVB. Note, salt water. They were at least honest about it. Salt water. You mean like the oceans? Yeah. Under the Earth's surface. Imagine that. Natural causes of fluid movement became apparent when pressure sensors deployed in KTBVB recorded changes in pressure due to the Earth tides caused by the gravitational pull of the moon. Well, they cannot prove the gravitational pull of the moon, as if this were true in large bodies of water, then lakes would also have tides, just like the oceans do, but that doesn't happen. But they do bring forth an interesting fact. The water below the Earth's crust experienced tidal changes, just like the oceans. This is certainly not something you will learn in science class. This story has the same dilemma when at the bottom, however. At the bottom of the hole, they say there was water, but it reached a temperature of 509 degrees Fahrenheit. Still got the boiling point dilemma. The water wouldn't be there. It would evaporate. Remember, prove all things. So let's deal with this supposed Earth magma core real quick. These are similar charts to what we are shown in science classes. However, we have never drilled past 7.5 miles into the Earth's crust. Bigger problem? If this was true, we are in major trouble. If the Earth has a liquid core of magma or otherwise, this means the continents are floating and not attached to anything. If the Earth is rotating at 1,000 miles per hour at the equator and 66,000 miles it rotates around the sun, how is it possible that we do not have one large train wreck of a continent? Because that's what we would have, and that just doesn't happen. Again, it's not observable and it's not science. It is religion. The answer from scientists vary, but all lead to the same conclusion. It's magic. Did you ever wonder how gravity could be so intense as to hold a skyscraper in place, yet standing right next to it? Supposedly, it discriminates as to not crush you and I? Ludicrous. Or how does that same gravity know how to apply the appropriate force to the underside of the Earth in the southern hemisphere, holding the same size skyscraper to the Earth? Ever wonder how it can rain upside down on the southern hemisphere? That's another video. Better yet, we have never been to any of these planets, nor do we even have one photo of either. CGI is not a photo. Yet we know what their cores are like. How? More magic, of course. Now for the hydrothermal vents we promised. Along the mid-ocean ridge system and the oceanic trench system both, which we believe are all connected, or at least once were, there are hydrothermal vents, heat vents, in the bottom of the rifts, the ancient rivers. These heat vents superheat water at the bottom of the ocean, infusing several minerals, most importantly salt, which balances the pH of the ocean. How did chance know to place these vents there, in just the right spots where the ocean is below freezing temperatures? Answer, once again, it's magic. Just as evolution, the Big Bang, the conveyor belts on the ocean floor, the magma core of the Earth and the other planets, the moon landing, gravity, which is alive and thinks for itself, it's all magic. Certainly not observable science. God placed these vents there and uses them to balance the pH of the ocean, bringing up water from the fountains of the great deep. They're still dumping into the ocean today. We are showing the black smoker here. There are also white smokers and other types of hydrothermal vents as well. This distribution map shows the location of heat vents on the ocean floor. The ancient river system remains active today, further proving its long-term existence. It is connected and operates the same worldwide. Note the similarities between the function of the Eden River, the mid-ocean ridge, and the four ancient rivers, the oceanic trench system. We did hear one naysayer say the mid-ocean trench is blocked in Iceland, but this again is simply not true. The below images show a continuous ridge which splits the entire island of Iceland, even through its own lake. The mid-ocean ridge does in fact continue, which is proven by science. In describing the river from Eden, Genesis 2:10 says, "And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted and became into four heads." Here is the mid-ocean ridge, which again has a deep rift river through its entire 40,000 miles around the entire earth. We believe it is the ancient river that flowed from Eden. And look, there are four main heads to this river. Scholars who make the assumption that this river is somehow near Israel are making leaps that are not supported by the Bible, including the Tigris and Euphrates, which are mistranslations of the original Hebrew rivers Hiddekel and Parat. It doesn't say Tigris and Euphrates. Those words don't exist in the original. The Bible does not actually say Tigris or Euphrates, and this leads us down the wrong path, which is what it is intended to do. See the four heads we have numbered, and note the Eden River, the mid-ocean ridge, flows through the earth from basically the North Pole all the way down and all the way around under Australia and up all the way to Mexico. Wait a minute. If this were true, the Eden River must follow the normal laws of river systems, which means it must flow downhill. Is this possible? Well, here are the average depths of the ocean floor according to NOAA. The Atlantic Ocean gets deeper than the Arctic Ocean. The Indian Ocean is yet deeper, and the Pacific Ocean is even deeper. In other words, the Eden River mid-ocean ridge is actually flowing downhill from one ocean to the next. It begins just below the North Pole and continues down and around to the Pacific. It fits. This means Eden's location would be in the North Pole. Not the garden, but Eden. The Garden of Eden is actually east of Eden, and we are unsure where exactly that might be. Genesis continues to describe the four river heads. Genesis 2, 11, and 12. The name of the first is Pison. We've talked about that. That is it which compasseth, surrounds, the whole land of Havilah. Where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good, there is bdellium and the onyx stone. Notice the blue path we have drawn which flows from the Eden River, mid-ocean ridge, from Mexico up the west coast of the U.S., California, to Canada, to Alaska, over to Russia, down to Japan, and look, it splits at the Philippines, just below Taiwan. It goes around and comes back together in portions of Indonesia. This fits the definition of the Pisan River, and imagine this is actually a series of trenches from the oceanic trench system. We already discussed that Philippines is Ophir, Sheba, Tarshish, and Havilah. We reviewed the two scriptures earlier referencing that the gold of Upaz, in harmony with Tarshish and Ophir, is the gold of the Pisan River. So what we know is that this river surrounds the whole land of Havilah, where there is good gold, pearl, and onyx stone. We have proven that that is the Philippines. And look, it surrounds the Philippines. This is the only river defined by its resources. Why? Remember, Adam and Eve knew this. There was no portion of the earth in which he was not aware and given dominion. To assume he stayed in a small spot and never left is just not supported by Scripture, human nature, nor the responsibility that accompanies the authority God gave him over the entire earth. It all just makes sense. Let's look at an even closer view of the ocean floor in this area we are calling Havilah. Well, science does it again. They tell us there are 7 oceans, but there is really only one continuous world ocean. They tell us the mid-ocean ridge has 7 or more names, yet it's actually still just one continuous system. But when we get to the trenches, wow, they go crazy. Don't be overwhelmed by all these names. They don't matter. What matters is that these trenches virtually run together, exposing the ancient river system. Forget that they call them trenches of different names, and look at the actual ocean floor. It tells the story. It is one continuous system. Let's look at the Pacific Ocean. Wikipedia says a similar relationship between proximity to rivers, forearc width, and trench morphology can be observed from east to west, along the Alaskan-Aleutian convergent margin. The convergent plate boundary offshore Alaska changes along its strike from a filled trench, really? With broad forearc in the east, near the coastal rivers of Alaska, to a deep trench with narrow forearc in the west, offshore the Aleutian Islands. In plain English, forget all that. What it says is the oceanic trench system, in other words, the Pisan River, flows from east to west, exactly as we've shown it. Sediment from modern rivers dumping into the ocean have filled portions of the trenches near the continents, which makes sense. Add sediment from the settling of the oceans from the Great Flood, and you may have an even greater amount of sediment. But regardless, even Encyclopedia Britannica tells us that some of these trenches are filled with sediment. They credit modern rivers, and this is true. However, remember, there was a global flood, which we will prove further, and there would have been major amounts of additional sediment from that catastrophe, the amounts of which we have never seen the like. To ignore such is not scientific, because that's what we observe. In fact, there's over 270 flood stories around the earth in history. You can't ignore that and call it science, because that's based on people's observations that have been passed from generation to generation. It must be a part of the calculation, at least taken into account. You must ask yourself, do you believe the Bible or occult science and history? Now, Wikipedia also defines filled trenches as trenches that are partially infilled, are known as troughs, and sometimes they are completely buried and lack bathymetric expression. So science admits that some of these trenches have been filled with sediment. We propose that these 4 trench systems, which are evident, are in fact continuous ancient rivers at the bottom of the ocean, and they fit the exact descriptions of the 4 ancient rivers in Genesis, just as the mid-ocean ridge fits the description of the river from Eden. By the way, the deepest modern river is the Congo River in Africa, which is only 720 feet deep. The trench system is 2 miles deep. The river from Eden is 1.5 miles deep. The Eden River would have flowed downhill from Arctic to Atlantic to Indian to the Pacific Oceans, each deeper than the other. Additionally, the river from Eden would have continued to flow downhill, as science tells us would be the case if it's a river, into the 4 rivers, which are even deeper at 1.9 to 2.5 miles deep, which is the average depth of the oceanic trenches, as opposed to the 1.5 mile depth of the Eden River mid-ocean ridge system. All of these facts come from the very scientist who will likely deny our theory as impossible. Again, you must prove all things for yourself. What makes sense to you? Remember again, water flows downhill. Furthermore, with rare exception, which we believe would be the infilling of trenches by sediment, as we illustrated earlier, notice even the trenches themselves show greater and greater depths in the direction in which the Pison River flows. What a coincidence that the deepest trenches are the ones at the end of the ancient river system. But God gave us more clues here, which tie this all together. Genesis 2:11 and 12 says, "And the gold of that land is good. There is bdellium, pearl, and the onyx stone." As we dealt with in previous videos, the ancient gold of the Philippines is historically proven since at least 1000 BC, and the Upaz description ties Philippines, which is ancient Ophir, where Solomon got his gold for the temple, as the gold of Pison, which is Havilah, the ancient land of gold prior to the flood. In fact, the largest pearl in the world was found in the Philippines, in the Palawan Sea, and we'll discuss this. Onyx is native to the Philippines as well. Most importantly, the Philippines is surrounded by ancient trenches we believe to be the ancient Pison River, surrounding the land of Havilah, Philippines, which we will prove, in fact, is the ancient land of Adam and Eve, as well as Noah. Genesis 2:11 and 12, Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. Job said, "It cannot be valued with the gold of Ophir," which is the same as Havilah, we've already proven, "with the precious onyx," there you go, same as Havilah, "or the sapphire." Note, he tied in the onyx just like Havilah, and sapphire is also native to the Philippines. "And David said, King's daughters were among thy honorable women. Upon thy right hand did stand the queen in gold of Ophir. A princess and a queen would only wear the best gold. He later ties Sheba in the same way. Please view this entire series for detailed evidence of this synergy between Sheba, Ophir, Tarshish, and Havilah. For review, remember Joktan's sons went to the far east, likely to find the ancient land of Havilah, which he named one of his sons after. And we provided sources that Havilah, Sheba, and Ophir settled in the same area. Add to this documented history from these three sources, which state that the jewelry of the Philippines was found in 1st century Egypt, meaning Philippines was producing fine gold as well as other resources since at least the ancient times of Solomon. Wikipedia says they were mining gold in the Philippines since 1000 BC. Just how did this jewelry get to Egypt if the Philippines was an isolated area until the Spanish arrived in the 1600s? Answer: this is junk history from the Catholic Church. They made it up. They covered up the true history of the Philippines. Philippines traded with Israel in 1000 BC. We may not be able to fill in all the historical gaps that have been covered up, but we know for certain that Philippines is Ophir, Sheba, Tarshish, and Havilah. We discussed before in our series that Italian scholar Pigafetta, who traveled with Magellan, wrote, Mindoro, Philippines, possessed great skill in mixing gold with other metals, and gave it natural and perfect appearance that could deceive the best of silversmiths. The natives were also known for jewelries made of other precious stones, of Tarshish and Ophir. This too is reminiscent of Jeremiah 10:9 that says, from Tarshish and gold of Upas, they are all the work of cunning men. Let's clear up one issue, which is really easy. What is bdellium? The word is only used 2 times in the Bible. Once we read earlier regarding Havilah, and once in Numbers 11:7. And the manna was as coriander seed, and the color therefore as the color of bdellium. So what color is bdellium? Why, the color of this yucky resin from Africa, which some scholars pose is the definition in Genesis 2? Or how about white as pearl? Manna would be a whitish color, more like a pearl. African resin is an insane guess, and it really wasn't that difficult to find that there are only 2 uses for the word, and it is clearly pearl, not yucky resin. And the Philippines, Havilah and Ophir, not only has pearl, but the largest in the world by far, further proving it has the best pearl. In 1934, they found the world's largest pearl in the Palawan Sea, which is where the Pison River flows. Imagine that. The pearl of Lao Tzu was 14 pounds and worth approximately $42 million, and was estimated at 600 years old. But in 2006, a Filipino fisherman was able to find an even larger one, the Puerto Princesa pearl, at 75 pounds, valued around $130 million. And Philippines has been well known to mine for onyx stone since ancient times. Again, Havilah is Ophir, Philippines, which is surrounded by the ancient Pison River, which we still see on the ocean floor map. But this land of Havilah has even more significance. Let's look at Noah for a minute. Genesis 6:14 says, "Make thee an ark of gopher wood." Look it up. No one knows what gopher wood is. Gopher is not a Hebrew word. Strong's Concordance says it is a kind of tree or wood of uncertain derivation. It only appears in the Bible one time and has no other reference, or does it? What are we missing here? We believe we have found a missing link. No, not that one, because it doesn't exist in the real world. Check this out. In 1828, Noah Webster's American Dictionary renders a definition that has disappeared from history. It defines Ophir wood. O-P-H-E-R is an alternative spelling of Ophir. O-P-H-I-R. A species of wood used in the construction of Noah's Ark. Could gopher wood actually be Ophir wood? Maybe this is a mistake. It did not carry over in any biblical translations we can find, yet this is most significant. Could there be another source? Around the same time in 1816, in his book, The Pilgrim's Muse, author and minister Joseph Thomas also recites scripture in poetic form. Oddly, he also renders Genesis 6:14 not as gopher wood, but instead as Ophir wood. Not only does he render this the same as Noah Webster, but he also capitalizes Ophir, as if it is a place just as Noah Webster's American Dictionary did. We believe this solves the ancient mystery of gopher wood, which does not exist in history, other than a modern tree found in the U.S. named long after Noah's Ark, not before. Gopher wood is Ophir wood. Did Noah live in Ophir, which was ancient Havilah and modern-day Philippines? Did Solomon use the same wood that was used to build the ark in the temple? Is this why the gold of Ophir, Havilah, was so precious to Solomon that he would build an entire navy just to go there, mind you? No other stops are listed on the route ever. Note, his navy only had that one expressed purpose: go to Ophir for resources. Why? Because it was the ancient land of Havilah, where Noah was from, where Adam and Eve were from. Remember the portion of our series where we discovered the Philippines' special national tree, the Nara tree, which is a red sandalwood fitting the description of almug wood used to build the pillars and terraces of the temple? We reiterate, Nara is a word of Hebrew origin, meaning she who must be admired. This definition is fitting of the story of the Queen of Sheba, tying Sheba, Ophir, to the story. Well, this would also likely be the same wood of Ophir, Ophir wood. So where did Adam and Eve settle after they were exiled from the Garden of Eden? Well, there is only one land defined by its resources in early Genesis outside of the garden. Did you know the name of Eve in Hebrew is actually Hava? Add an IL in the center, which is a variation of El, meaning God, and you get Havilah. God inside of Eve. Could Havilah, Ophir, be the place where Adam and Eve lived all the way through to Noah? Let's look at Strong's Concordance definition of Havilah. One that suffers pain, that brings forth. You mean like childbirth? The land where she bore the first children of humanity, but in the pain of labor as the curse she received in the Garden of Eden? Note the alternative spelling of Havilah is Evilas or Evilath. Eve. This is an exact tie to the curse Eve was to bear from the Garden of Eden. That's no coincidence. Havilah is the land named after Eve and is defined by her curse. This means Philippines was the home of Adam and Eve, likely one land and not islands prior to the flood, surrounded by the Pisan River, which we can see from the ocean floor still today. We're almost there, but someone is thinking right now about the Ark, which supposedly landed in Turkey on Mount Ararat, right? This would pose a dilemma in our thinking, for sure. Well, what does the Bible tell us? Genesis 8:4 says, "The ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat." Note the plural mountains. Ararat is the Hebrew spelling of the word Urartu from Mesopotamia, Iraq, meaning highest land. So the mountains of the highest land, Ararat. But let's let the Bible interpret the Bible. Genesis 11:2, "And it came to pass, as they, Noah's descendants, journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there." Noah's descendants came from east of Shinar? But is Mount Ararat in Turkey east of Shinar, otherwise known as Babylon, which is modern-day Iraq? Problem: Turkey is due north of Iraq, Shinar, Babylon. It is not east. Why does the Bible mention they came from the east? To give us a clue. God certainly knew that Turkey would make a claim to the ark, and he left us clues to give us truth. But there's more. Turkey is not the highest land, even in close proximity to its own territory. Within 600 miles, there are two mountain ranges with higher peaks, almost 2,000 feet higher than Mount Ararat in Turkey. One of these is east of Shinar, but Urartu Ararat means highest land, and the highest land is in fact the Himalayas, Mount Everest, which is almost twice as tall as Mount Ararat. This is significant because Genesis 8:9 says, "At the point in which the dove was sent out and returned, having found no land, the waters were on the face of the whole earth." This means the ark rested on the very highest mountain, and all the rest of the earth was covered by water, meaning it had to be the highest land, just as the definition says. This is why the word whole earth was used. It was in fact the highest land, Mount Everest, east of Shinar. Would Mount Ararat in Turkey, which is half the height of Mount Everest, fit here? No. But that's still not all. Ever wonder how far a dove or pigeon can fly without resting? Well, 1,100 miles is the record for pigeons. The Hebrew yalna is known as a dove or pigeon, and that's the word used in this passage. It was more likely a pigeon, and Noah would have known the best option since he was 600 years old after all. Oh, and the pigeon has a built-in GPS using the magnetic field of the earth, and his eyesight is far greater than ours. He can see for more than 25 miles. And he would have seen mountains within range. Problem number 3, Mount Ararat in Turkey is actually within a dove's flight of taller mountains. It is rather improbable that this is the mountain in which Noah's Ark rested. But we're not done. Genesis 8:5 reads, "And the waters decreased continually until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, were the tops of the mountains seen." This is a picture of Mount Ararat in Turkey. Do you see the tops of other mountains like Noah would have? And this is from the vantage point of an airplane. Mount Ararat has twin peaks, but it is a stand-alone volcano. It is one mountain, not mountains. And the closest mountaintops, well, they're 240 miles away, which you don't even see from the airplane vantage point, whether alone on a ship. So Noah would not have seen other mountaintops if he landed on Mount Ararat in Turkey, because he did not land there. He rested on the highest mountain, Mount Everest. He left from the Philippines in the Far East and floated to the Himalayas in 150 days approximately. The earth flooded for 1 month before the ark was lifted afloat, because he would have built it on a mountain, not in the valley. For those of you who are familiar with Ron Wyatt or others discovering wood boats on mountains in Turkey or Armenia, if they are finding ancient boats, which they may have, it is not Noah's Ark. There may well have been other boats, as the ancient rivers would have been easy to travel, and with no rain, there were probably no storms. They would not have likely survived the flood with people in them, but the boats may well have floated. The generations before the flood lived hundreds of years. They would have figured out how to build boats. This is not something that requires rocket science, whatever that is. It is not an astonishing art of modern times. There have always been boats since even the Garden of Eden, when Adam likely traveled the entire world in which he was given dominion. It would have been irresponsible not to travel the earth for the leader of the earth who had been given such dominion. Don't buy into junk history. Prove it with the Bible. And if it passes the test, believe it. But if it doesn't, throw it out. One last point about the ancient Pison River, which surrounds the Philippines, land of Havilah and Ophir. If it is in fact an ancient river, and most all marine species survive the flood, there should be a greater marine life biodiversity around the Philippines. But is there? The Carpenter Report from 2005 says Philippines is not only part of the center, but is, in fact, the epicenter of marine biodiversity, with the richest concentration of marine life on the entire planet. Well, it just so happens to be the case, and here's a second source to confirm. According to CNN, on April 30th, 2012, the Philippines sits at the heart of the Coral Triangle, the global center of marine biodiversity, about halfway between the provinces of Batangas and Mindoro. The Verde Island Passage boasts the highest concentration of marine species in the planet. Yep, once again, Philippines does not just fit as a possible, but the one and only place on Earth that could be the ancient land of Havilah, surrounded by the Pison River, which flowed from the River of Eden. But one last piece of business. Where are the other three riverheads? Genesis 2:13. And the name of the second river is Gihon. The same is it that compasseth, surrounds, the whole land of Cush. Oops. There goes the Bible again, disproving that Ethiopia or Yemen could be Sheba and Ophir nor Havilah. What is the whole land of Cush? Cush is basically Ethiopia, but the whole land of Cush would be the entire continent of Africa. And what do you know? There is an ancient trench system surrounding Africa as well, which feeds from the Eden River, mid-ocean ridge system, where you see the number 2 on the map. Remember, modern rivers do not fit any of these descriptions, and there is no river surrounding just Ethiopia. Whole land means entire continent, and look, it fits. Once again, the close-up view of the ocean floor shows the many trenches which make up the ancient Gihon River surrounding the whole land of Cush, Africa. Genesis 2:14a. And the name of the third river is Hiddekel. That is it which goeth toward the east of Assyria. By the way, even the King James suggests the translation of Hiddekel as Tigris. Problem is the Tigris River flows south, not east, is not east of Assyria, and most of all feeds off the Euphrates River, not the Eden River. Hiddekel is the name of this river in the original Hebrew, not Tigris, and no one should have made such a leap of error. It's funny how someone is trying to lead us to Babylon as the beginning of society. I wonder who would do that. Wait for our Babylon series, and you will see this is a purposeful misleading. Again, look at a more detailed map of the ocean floor and see the trenches involved in this river system as well. Once again, it fits. Note, east of Assyria would begin around the Persian Gulf, which is actually where the ocean floor shows the ancient river. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which were also named well after the flood, do not qualify. Genesis 2:14, Part B. And the fourth river is Parat. That's it. All the information we have on this ancient river, certainly not enough to claim it is the Euphrates as it is translated in error. But we do see a fourth riverhead that just so happens to begin at the Eden River, mid-ocean ridge. And look at the detailed ocean floor map and notice the trenches in line once again. We have one last observation for you. Notice the river from Eden path. It is clear that the fountains of the great deep burst forth through the 40,000-mile long Eden River, mid-ocean ridge, headed down the mountain range on both sides of it through all 40,000 miles, and these mega tsunamis smashed into what we call the continents. This is why we see no land other than islands anywhere near the Eden River, mid-ocean ridge. Take special note of the location of the Philippines, Havilah, Ophir. It is further away from the point of impact and would have been the ideal position for the ark to have been built. This explains why there are so many more islands that survived in the areas of Southeast Asia than anywhere else on Earth. After exhaustive research, we conclude that Philippines is ancient Havilah and Ophir, Tarshish, and Sheba. Adam and Eve and their generations lived there. Noah's ark was built of the wood of Ophir, not gopher, and this would have been the same Nara wood, Hebrew word, used to build Solomon's temple. Noah's ark did not land in Turkey, which is north of Shinar, not east, but instead in the true highest land called Mount Everest today. How have they gotten away with this for so long? We will explore this further, but we believe that the bloodlines of Menelik, son of the supposed Queen of Sheba from Ethiopia, the wrong Sheba, son of Cush, and not Ophir's brother, as the Bible states, who in fact was a Nephilim half-goat hybrid. This impostor has been used over the centuries to justify the rule of pharaohs who lead us to today's European royal families, which also, unfortunately, lead us to the bloodlines of every U.S. president, including Obama and Trump. With this history corrected, it exposes these royal bloodlines as deriving from a hybrid Nephilim, appropriately, whom Solomon probably never even knew, whether alone fathered a child with, as the Bible never states this, just a cult legend from the Kibra Nagast in Ethiopia. This requires much proof, and we will prove this out even further. But for this series, we believe we have provided ample proof of where Solomon's gold originated and why it was so incredibly significant. Philippines is the land of Ophir and ancient Havilah and Sheba and Tarshish. And Jesus spoke of the Philippines in his prophetic word concerning the last generations in Matthew 12:42 and again in Luke. The queen of the south shall rise up in the judgment with this generation and shall condemn it. For she came from the uttermost parts of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and behold, a greater than Solomon is here. This is referencing the queen of Sheba, and Sheba is Philippines. Rise up, Philippines, come out of mystery Babylon and stand against corruption. You are already seeing this prophecy begin to be fulfilled in the actions of your current fight against drugs, which is really Satan's window to demon possession. Your history has been erased by the Roman Empire Catholic Church and Roman Empire's American Empire. See the Treaty of Paris, which formed the United States, as the King of England exposes his title as Prince Elector of the Holy Roman Empire and the United States. This was not a decree of independence. It was a continuation of an empire, which is evident in its fruit, which even brought a war to your shores, which it instigated right here, causing loss of your civilians. Stand on your own. Create your relationship with God directly without the Roman system, which originated in Babylon, both the religion and the government. You are not a so-called third world poor country. Even President Bush recognized this. In answering a final question on a talk show in the United States, he was asked, who is the richest country on earth? His answer was not America, but in fact, the Philippines. It is time to rise up and take your place and fulfill the words of Jesus. A greater than Solomon is here. Follow Jesus, not any organization or control system or, sorry if this offends you, a pope who claims to be a replacement for Jesus on earth. This is not God. This concludes our Solomon's Gold series. Thank you for listening, and remember, prove all things. Visit our website at thegodculture.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel for future series, as we are only just warming up. Thank you.